So you're an Overwatch player looking to try Marvel Rivals, but you have no idea who to main. Well, luckily for you, there's a lot of overlap with some characters from Overwatch and Marvel Rivals. So in this video, we're going to go over every single hero and talk to you about what you should play in Rivals, depending on your former main in Overwatch. Now, we're going to be releasing a lot of Marvel Rivals guides on this channel, and you're not going to want to miss out on any of them, so smash that subscribe button, and let's get into the video. Now, before we begin, I want to make it clear that not every hero is going to have a perfect counterpart. Oftentimes, I'm going to be actually syncing up characters based on their mechanical requirements or just similarities between the character playstyles. And I'm not necessarily going to recommend characters within the same role. I might recommend a DPS for you, even though you're a support main in Overwatch. So keep all that in mind, and let's jump in. Now, the first character is Ana, and I'm actually not even going to recommend a support as the character that Ana mains would fit best. I think the best character is actually an aim-oriented character. For example, Hela is extremely precise and powerful if you have the mechanical requirements, and I think Ana players would have those mechanical requirements. That being said, if you want to stay in the supporting role and you want to put people to sleep, then Mantis kind of fits one-to-one, even if your mechanical fire is not the same. Now, next up is actually Ashe, and Ashe I'm actually putting in the same category. Ashe would be perfect for Hela for sure. Just long distance damage and poke match Ashe's playstyle to a T. You could also technically play something like Punisher that match the hit scan oriented nature of Ashe, but I do think that Hela probably matches a bit better, but both would be perfectly fine. Now, Baptiste is an interesting one because I actually think he's pretty similar to a lot of DPS related characters, people like Punisher for instance, but I'm actually going to recommend Rocket for Bap. His playstyle of damage into healing kind of matches the flow of Baptiste, and with really powerful utility, although not quite the same. I do think that a Bap player that is really good will be able to adapt to Rocket very quickly. I also think it's interesting how Rocket's ultimate amplifies damage like a different version of Amplification Matrix. It kind of feels like they have a lot of coinciding kits. Next on the list, we do gotta talk about Bastion, and I don't really think that there's a fantastic fit. I really think maybe you could recommend the Punisher because he gets turret, miniguns, and that's similar. I mean, not really that close, but there isn't really anything that is quite like Bastion. But yeah, I would say the Punisher is fine. Then the next character is Brig, and I'm actually gonna give a couple of different recommendations across the roles. First off is Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is gonna be a support that actually is fairly aggressive and does a lot of damage. I think Adam Warlock is kind of like a hodgepodge of characters like Zen, Mercy, and Brig all combined, especially because Warlock has an ability that is very similar to a more powerful pack from Brig, but that bodyguard playstyle isn't really there in the same way. So I'm actually going to recommend some tanks for Brig players. Specifically, I think the control of a character like Groot trying to control the battlefield, space out the enemy, and maintain space really matches a little bit better than some of the other options, but I definitely think that there's a lot of different directions a Brig player could go in. Next up, we got to talk about Cassidy, and the perfect character for Cassidy is definitely the Winter Soldier. His gun is very similar to Cassidy's revolver. Even if it doesn't have 6 shots, it's gonna fire similar, and I really think he's the character that kind of embodies that mid-range, really high damage per second if you can hit your headshots, and it's gonna fit Cassidy pretty well, even though there are other abilities on Winter Soldier that don't necessarily carry over perfectly, but that's gonna be true for every character. And you could also play the usual Punisher or Hela as like the go-to hit scan DPS replacements. But next up is D.Va, and you might think that I'm going to recommend a one-to-one for Penny Parker. Like, I get it. Penny Parker is a tank and has a mech, and D.Va is a tank and has a mech, but they actually don't have a lot of similarities together playstyle-wise. Now, if you just like the looks of them and the visualization, then by all means go for it. But if you're expecting a very similar play pattern, it's not going to be the same at all. Not many tanks have great mobility that allows them to peel or deny enemies that are like on off angles and things like that. But the one tank right now I would recommend is actually Venom if you're a D.Va player. I guess you could also include Thor in there because he can peel and deny just like D.Va can. And then on the DPS role, I think Star-Lord actually fits D.Va players quite well. The tracking mechanical requirements and the taking of off angles plus the mobility kind of match them pretty one-in-one. But if you want to just copy D.Va Ultimate, it's like Scarlet Witch's Ultimate. Is very similar in how it's gonna feel in early Overwatch where people just didn't play around cover and died to D.Va bombs. It just reminds me a lot of Scarlet Witch's Ultimate. And yeah, I mean, getting those crazy, you know, 5-man, 6-man kills with an ultimate is definitely kind of cool. Next up, we actually have Doomfist, and Doomfist is also gonna fit really, really well with Venom. Venom is gonna be able to get a lot of shields, gonna be able to go in aggressively, but there are other characters that also match him. Specifically, Winter Soldier is gonna have like a chain-off form of mobility that can keep comboing off that I do feel like is a little bit Doomfist-esque. And then, of course, Spider-Man, especially DPS Doom, with his uppercut, the fast mobility. Doomfist players are gonna feel right at home with Spider-Man. And then last up is Black Panther. The hybrid mobility and the combo-oriented fighting game aspect of the character match DPS Doom quite a bit. So you kind of have a lot of characters that can fit what you want, depending on if you want like a DPS Doom or a tank Doom or how you want to play the game. So yeah, Doomfists are feasting. Next off, we got to talk about Echo, and for Echo's ultimate, it's going to definitely be Loki being able to copy someone and then ult. It's going to be very similar to Echo's ultimate. They share a lot of similarities as far as that's concerned, but for general playstyles, I would actually say either Iron Man or Star-Lord match the mobility heavy playstyle of an Echo, and I think that those things could fit rather well. Next off is Genji, and there are also quite a few characters for Genji that I think you could reasonably play and it would match rather well. Psylocke definitely has a lot of Genji-oriented elements with the dash, the dueling capabilities, really a pretty natural fit for Genji players. But there's also characters like Spider-Man with that hyper mobility and combo kill potential, and then characters like Black Panther that just has that same level of mobility in 1v1s. And also, I would even include characters like Magic in there. That could definitely be a Genji player's perfect hero. But for Hanzo, we don't have a perfect fit yet. As of recording this video, Hawkeye is not revealed, and the Archer for the Archer probably is gonna be a natural fit, I imagine, but we'll have to wait and see. For now, I would actually recommend Namor, a projectile-oriented character that fights from some distance, but there isn't really a perfect fit, and you could probably go in a couple of different directions. Going back to a support, we have Illari, and Illari has a couple of heroes that I think fit really well. Notably, Adam Warlock is going to be really, really great being able to dish out damage. Adam Warlock does a lot of damage. Also, characters like Luna Snow, I think a lot of support players could easily go to Luna Snow if they like them, and this is true for several of the other supports. But Luna Snow is undoubtedly going to be extremely powerful and really, really picked and played, so I imagine a lot of supports are going to move over. But really, Illari is going to match with the same Overwatch characters that are like Hitscan, and the characters that share the playstyles with that are like Winter Soldier, Punisher, Hela, all the same stuff. So I could imagine that Illari players are going to have an easier time swapping roles. Pivoting to tank again, we have Junkerqueen. Not a lot of tanks that I think match Junkerqueen's playstyle perfectly. Maybe you could say Hulk because he's going in aggressively, but with him jumping around and things like that, it doesn't really match her that well. I actually would recommend Captain America, a melee DPS that also has an ultimate that increases speed and healing for his team. That kind of reminds me a little bit of like a more powerful Shout. I think Captain America will probably fit a little bit better. There's not really a perfect pick here yet. Maybe we'll wait and see. Now for Junkrat, I would actually recommend Penny Parker. The area denial and space denial playstyle and effectiveness of a Junkrat is actually very similar to the area and space denial of Penny Parker, also setting up traps and punishing enemies from walking into certain areas. That is also what Penny Parker can do as well, and I actually think that they are really similar even if they aren't in the same role. They kind of do the same fundamental thing, just a different way. For Juno, I would definitely for sure recommend Luna Snow. They're actually really similar in a lot of their playstyles, positioning, and the way that they're going to be playing throughout the game. And I just have a feeling that a lot of Juno players will become Luna Snow players. But I also think that Juno players could be a Mantis player, or you might even want to pivot roles and be someone like a Star-Lord that has a tracking-based fire and flight. But then we have Kiriko, and visually, and even in some ways, the playstyle is similar to Psylocke with the off-angling and the flanking. I could also easily recommend Mantis as a character that doesn't fit perfectly one-to-one, but it's another support that mechanically can challenge you and has some really nice pieces of utility to use to outplay enemies. Mechanically, really good Kiriko players are going to have a lot of characters that they fit really well with, because Kiriko's mechanics are a fast-moving projectile, which is like what a lot of the projectiles are in freaking Marvel Rivals. So yeah, you're going to be pretty well set up no matter what you pick. The next character is Lifeweaver, and there is once again not a great pick for Lifeweaver that I really think matches. Lifeweaver Lifeweaver is just very, very unique in their playstyle, and I can't really think of any of the characters that match it all that well. For positioning similarities, I probably could recommend Adam Warlock as characters that just get to intervene in the fight in a lot of different ways and stay in the backline while outputting some amount of damage. But I'm actually going to recommend Jeff the Landshark as a character that is just like Lifeweaver in the fact that he's so unique and different than everything else. I think that Jeff is the type of character that someone that was initially drawn to Lifeweaver might be drawn to Jeff because of how different and wild their kits are from the norm. Now for Lucio, I absolutely have to recommend Luna Snow. She's skating and that's kind of where their similarities end. But of course his ultimate is also a little bit similar to Luna Snow's ultimate, Fate of Both Worlds, that give her the choice to heal or instead of speed boost, damage boost her team. I think that's pretty cool. That being said, Lucio is one of those unique experiences that no character in Rivals really match up to, so we'll have to wait and see. Now we do got to talk about Mauga, and yeah, Mauga is not gonna overlap with a ton of tanks. I think he matches some DPS a little bit better. Characters like the Punisher, he's gonna match really well. As a tank that just stands there and puts out damage, I think Magneto can kind of fit, but maybe Mauga players can finally play a character that doesn't play itself and play a rocket or something like that. All Mauga slander aside, let's talk about Mei. Now, in the DPS role, there isn't really anything that fits Mei all that well. I think you could maybe say, oh, she's a projectile distance character, so you could play something like Namor, and he has some amount of crowd control with his turrets. You could do something like that. But really, I think the best character for Mei is actually Groot. Groot has walls, the same play style as controlling space, denying enemies retreation. That's really similar to Groot, and I think they're a one-to-one in that regard. And then you could even say something like Penny Parker with the area control, the space denial, similar to Mei. Those characters fit Mei really well, and it kind of goes to show that Mei's kind of similar in kit-wise to a tank, and we see that here in full force. Now for Mercy, there isn't a character that has assumed the pocket role like Mercy does, but you could say Jeff the Shark as a character that can jump onto characters, can kind of throw heals around, isn't that mechanically demanding in my opinion, but still provides a lot of utility for their team. So that could be a really good pick. Or just probably it's going to be Luna Snow. I mean, a lot of Mercy players have already shown that they like Luna Snow, they like her playstyle, they like her art style, but I will say that you are going to need higher mechanical requirements than you're used to, but it shouldn't be that hard for you to pick up after grinding her a little bit. Now we have Moira, and I'm actually not even going to recommend a support for Moira. I'm just only going to recommend Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch's damage is just like Moira, her fade mobility is just like Moira, and Scarlet Witch is giving you full permission to be a DPS Moira, but an actual DPS, okay? PTSD aside, let's talk about Orisa. Orisa is kind of a tank that just maintains space, outputs damage, is a consistent frontline threat. You could say that a lot of tanks could share that similarity. Tanks like Doctor Strange, maybe. Magneto, maybe. Just like with Mauga, I'm a certified Orisa hater, so, you know, I think pretty much any character is going to be too complex for you to understand. Okay, I'm sorry. Moving on. Now for Pharah, it's going to be hard because there's not any flying characters in Marvel. I'm just kidding. All right, it's Iron Man. That's pretty much all that needs to be said. If you're a Pharah player, you should play Iron Man. That is just pretty natural. There's really not another character that you should play besides Iron Man. I guess I could recommend Namor as like a slower moving projectile character from range. But come on, it's Iron Man. Just play Iron Man. Now there's Ramattra, and Ramattra shares a lot of different similarities with different characters, so it's going to depend on what you like. I can confidently recommend both Hulk and Magneto. They kind of play both sides of the coin. I really think Magneto's probably going to give you your biggest kick, especially when you get his synergies turned on where he gets to use his sword, and he's like going to be both aggressive and damage dealing, but also a poker, and gets to play like both sides of the coin like Ramattra gets to, so that's what I would recommend. Now, pivoting back to DPS, we have Reaper, and of course, I could recommend someone like the Punisher. He does have a shotgun, but really, that hit-and-run style of play, I would actually give this to Scarlet Witch, most likely. A character that can get close range, has fade, fights at a pretty reasonably close range. I think that that probably works the best, but you could also recommend a lot of different heroes within that. If you like the mobility aspect of Reaper, there are characters like Spider-Man, Captain America. If you like the more strategic aspect of Reaper, I could see maybe like a Moon Knight or even a tank. There is quite a few characters that I think could fit. But next up, we have Reinhardt, and there also isn't a great Reinhardt character in Marvel Rivals. You could say Doctor Strange with a big barrier and just outputting a lot of damage, or you could say like the Hulk as a melee character, even though he does have some pretty crazy mobility. It's kind of like someone that could beat down. Most likely, though, Thor is going to be your best bet. I know he does have great mobility, but they visually are similar to one another, and I think Thor gets to kind of brute force his way onto people and really beat them up and beat them around in a way that I think that Reinhardt players also like to, so I think that there is some overlap there. Now, the next character is actually Roadhog, and Roadhog is actually going to match a DPS in Winter Soldier with the ability to grapple people in. If that's what you like out of Roadhog, which is kind of Roadhog's identity, then Winter Soldier is like perfect for you. But also, I think Penny Parker is a character that gets to use kind of like the area denial traps that Pigpen is, and at the end of the day, Hog is kind of trying to deny a certain amount of area or punish people for being in a certain area, and that's really what Penny Parker does, just in a little bit of a different way. So I could actually see either of those working for a Hog main coming to Marvel Rivals. Now, the next character is Sigma, and yeah, Sigma is just Magneto. Like, they are literally the same character. They share almost more similarities than differences, and yeah, if you're a Sigma player, play Magneto. Honestly, play Magneto anyways. He's super strong. But yeah, Sigma and Magneto are gonna match pretty much 1-in-1. You could also learn Doctor Strange too. I have a feeling that a lot of Magneto and Doctor Strange players are gonna be able to play both characters. And yeah, that would be my 2 recommendations, but definitely Magneto. It's literally the same character. But going back to a DPS, we have Sojourn, and Sojourn is gonna kind of match a lot of the same hit scan DPS types. I know that she's not a true hit scan DPS, and neither are these rival characters, but the same type of recommendations. I would have characters like the Punisher, characters like Hela, really fit Sojourn well. I think Hela in particular makes a lot of sense as a character that needs to be precise, hit headshots, has good mobility, and a pretty aggressive ultimate. They pretty much match, I think, right there. And then Soldier 76, of course, is gonna be the Punisher. They are literally like the same character. Not really, they just have a lot of overlapping similarities. So yeah, if you're a Soldier player, play the Punisher. I could also technically recommend Star-Lord, even though he isn't a character that is on the ground. He is a character that is going to off-angle quite a bit, while the Punisher probably stays with his team a little bit more than a Soldier would positionally, and the tracking is going to be similar, like the tracking-based aim. So, yeah, maybe you could do that instead. Now, for Sombra, I gotta recommend Psylocke. Of course, I gotta recommend Psylocke. Psylocke has an invisibility. She's an assassin-type character, and yeah, I mean, if you're a Sombra player, Psylocke seems like the perfect fit for you. Although, being able to deny abilities and turn that off, we'll see if another character comes out that has that as their central point. But for now, no. Symmetra, I would actually highly recommend Namor. Namor gets to put up turrets similar to Symmetra turrets, and then also has a projectile-based fire. Not gonna be quite the same, as Namor is gonna be a little bit proactive in trying to hit them consistently, and doesn't have that beam that Sim has. Sim is a pretty unique character, so it's not surprising that there isn't a perfect one-to-one. But being creative about where you play and how you're gonna get value out of your turrets is something that Symmetra players will feel right at home at. But you could also say maybe Doctor Strange with his teleport. If you really like that aspect of like rerouting your team to interesting spots in the middle of a fight or whatever, then maybe you like Doctor Strange even if he is a tank and in a different role. Now for Torb, I don't really think Torb has great one-to-ones. There's a couple characters I could recommend. Namor, maybe I would recommend Rocket or Penny Parker, but really there isn't a perfect character for Torb. Probably Namor though, if I had to recommend one. Now, next up is Tracer, and the character that is undoubtedly the best Tracer comparison is going to be Star-Lord. A lot of Tracer players are actually playing Star-Lord and being really good at Star-Lord. That burst-based tracking, knowing how to position yourself and move around, that's 100% Tracer, 100% Star-Lord. They really fit one-to-one. I can't really recommend another character more than I would recommend Star-Lord, but if you like hypermobility, there's a lot of them. You know, the same ones we talked about with Genji, Black Panther, Spider-Man, Psylocke, the works. Now for Venture, I would actually recommend Captain America for Venture, but I could also recommend Winter Soldier as well. Captain America for his melee aspect is pretty similar to how Venture wants to take fights, and then Winter Soldier is a character that has that level of combo, crowd control to be able to kind of chain off. I think that there is some similarity to be had there, but also in the tanking role, Thor gets to kind of brute force people around and kind of bully people around. That is similar to Venture's playstyle in some ways. So those are my main recommendations. And yeah, Venture's pretty unique, so it's hard to find a perfect one. But that's where I would start if I was a Venture player, and then maybe try some other characters from there. Next up is Widowmaker, and there isn't a perfect sniper yet, but I would imagine that Black Widow is going to be similar to what a Widowmaker would be. We'll see how far they go with that sniper concept, but she hasn't been revealed or announced yet as of recording this video. For now, though, it's Hela. Straight up Hela. If you are a Widow player, you play Hela. You dink heads, you carry fights. Yeah, you're Hela. That's as simple as it gets. It's pretty much point and click. You're going to position a lot of the similar ways. You're going to use your flight similar to a grapple. Now, as for Winston, Winston is undoubtedly Hulk. Hulk is very, very close to Winston. They engage very similar. They create a lot of space in similar ways. You could probably say Venom as well, but I do think that Hulk matches Winston's playstyle a lot better as someone that will jump in, cycle out, gather an ultimate, make a more proactive play, is very dive-oriented. Yeah, I would say Hulk is definitely my #1 recommendation for Winston players. Now, Wrecking Ball, on the other hand, is definitely Venom. I mean, those characters are extremely similar to one another in the way that they get shields, in the way that they slam in the way that they grapple in. If you're a Wrecking Ball player, you're going to absolutely love Venom, and I think he even gives you more options in some ways, so Wrecking Ball players, look no further. Now for Zarya, I also got to recommend Magneto. I know that Magneto is very similar to Sigma, but he's also super similar to Zarya with his bubbles that charge his crowd control rock that can knock back enemies. The same play patterns of being able to bubble in someone that's going in aggressive and then using that to aid your offensive capabilities is just a one-to-one to Zarya. So yeah, a Zarya player for sure is going to be right at home with Magneto, even if there is some extra stuff to learn. And then last but certainly not least is Zen, which I would definitely recommend Adam Warlock. The volley of his damage, the way he deals damage, feels similar to Zenyatta. You're not discording, but you're still outputting a ton of damage. And yeah, I think you also position fairly similarly to each other, and while your ultimate is not going to be keeping people alive, that's something that Luna Snow does, it's actually going to be able to resurrect people when they die, so even better. You don't have to go in, you just get to keep people alive after the fact. So yeah, Zen and Adam Warlock, I think, match pretty well together, and it would be the first recommendation for me. Now, just because I didn't recommend a Rivals character doesn't mean I think it's bad. It's just that it has less similarities to existing Overwatch characters, which I think is perfectly fine, in fact good, because you might find a new character that you like better than anything you've ever liked in Overwatch. So definitely try out all the characters I would recommend. But there's going to be so many guides on Marvel Rivals coming out on this channel, so absolutely crush that subscribe button and let me know down below what you want to see next. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.